Well, I'd like, first of all, to thank all of the speakers who've taken us through a journey of ink art in Beijing, Wuhan, Hong Kong, New York, various other parts of the world where it has been exhibited and practiced. And I guess before I start with any comments, I'd like to see if any of you have questions. The talks tended to sort of intersect at various points, whether you have any questions that you'd like to address to one another about your...
Can I say something?
Okay, you may say something.
We ask each other, yeah, or we just reply the answer.
Well, first, why don't we speak to one another, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And I hope if you have some comments or questions.
Abby actually raised a very interesting issues here, and also since you have planned for how to bring this kind of art, more kind of socially engaged art into the museum, especially think about if there any kind of work related to ink, and including this kind of, I mean the UCS the school is very strong with a strong program of public art, so we talk about this quite a lot. But in terms of think about this, how to let the ink, this issue in China is about exactly 100 years ago. The one thing just mentioned at the time in Chinese art world discussion about how to transform the traditional Chinese painting, the art form, serve the new society, and also become the new kind of the tool to matter the educated people and help people create the better kind of athletics. All this kind of idea comes from exactly 100 years ago. Seems it is still the task for us now. We talk about exactly the same issues, and although art is already developing in many different ways, we see the artists also much more kind of freedom, also much more kind of the concept, the tools, and the approaches you can use. But still, these issues, I really appreciate that you talk about this. Talking about the Asian Museum have this kind of intention to raise the issue at least to artists and also to the public, how to examine this and revalue this kind of art. Although I don't know the one thing I think you really nicely mentioned, the term that we use here is very difficult, right? Is the ink art or kind of sumo art or whatever. This terms used here, but no matter what term we use here, actually facing exactly the same thing. So I'd like to hear you have any more kind of in detail.
I don't necessarily have a lot of things in detail, which I really wish actually Jay is still here. Gonna call him out because I think we need to build this new direction for the museum together, from the director to the curator to all the staff working together. And within the museum and outside of the museum by working with colleagues. But I feel like I really appreciate the question because I think those are the questions in this program it was first raised. And I feel like as a curator, I'm certainly very often being framed in a position like some sort of authority, but I'm not. And I feel like I'm really an observer on how the world is changing, and artists really provide that form of expression for us to articulate a lot of things that we couldn't possibly do as an artist so many times. And I'm very skeptical of the kind of answer or any kind of answer we could come up with, because there's so much have changed. Even we still ask the same question 100 years ago from now to nowadays, because you look at the world, it has changed so much. From 100 years ago, there's not necessarily a capital market, and also ideology has changed so much. And even we just look at 30 years ago when the world seems to took a very big turn, and we seem to be at that turn again. So what is the artist's role in this particular juncture? So when I was looking at Zhou Zhenhui's work, that he actually looked back to what Gao Jianfu did, who was born in 1879. So I think when you're in part of this movement, whether it's a social movement or art movement, things started to change. And you started to have a lot of parts breaking loose. And so I think for me as an observer getting into a museum, I'm looking at a lot of things that is not in the existing system. So in so many ways I'm behind, and then in so many ways I'm a little bit like one step ahead. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out that myself. But as a museum, I feel like whatever that was working before, it has its pattern, it has its system. And the fact that I was hired to think critically about space, medium, artist engagement with the audience is sort of something that we need to experiment. I think that's kind of But I also have a question, to all of you, because I think as academics and also as CAT, knowing about the market and in the education side, academic side, how you guys are seeing these artists that is not in the system. Because I think there's some patterns that we can trace with the artists that is already on a lot of radars, that we see them in so many ways over and over again. So what about the ones that we don't see very often? You see the channels for that, the space for that? So that's my curiosity.
I don't know if that was specifically directed at me, but
No, everybody.
okay. Listening to Han's explanation of the biennial, that it actually reminded me that when you talk about this system, I don't actually think there's one single system. Or my question is, what system are you referring to? Because maybe what you meant was just the international art market and Sotheby's and Christie's. These are international, global presence. But actually, I think those are also niches within a larger conversation. And looking at what was happening at Wuhan Biennial, most of the artists I've never seen before, but I know that they are relevant in their context in China. And I think this is something to think about, as we're trying to debate how to even define or what word to use to say ink art or whatever, shui mo and whatnot. I think we all have to be very sensitive that art is being created in very specific contexts, and we can't compare a different context to another. Richard, you showed an image of Pang Gongkai and Jackson Pollock doing action painting, but I don't think that is necessarily fair, because I think Pang Gongkai is thinking about something completely different that just coincidentally happens to be very similar to what Jackson Pollock discovered. And so, I'm very sensitive to the fact that, some things could seem derivative, but they also couldn't be. They could be coincidence. And so the original question is about how do they fit into the system if they're not already on the radar. I think there's just many different systems that are coming online, and we have to be aware that we can't just all channel them into a single narrative. So, I just think there's a lot going on in different places, and to understand shui mo, and maybe we have to be more sensitive to things happening in China, what artists reacting to events and cultural situations that are in China, and they can't easily be translated outside to an international audience.
I say something, of course. I like the questions. Also, I also noticed actually, you mentioned, of course, in China we don't have one single system. We have different system for people. We often see that official side and non-official side, so on and so on. But actually, I just want to say, to be independent artists, to be independent thinking about what they are doing, why they use the 水墨 as a kind of expression, no matter it is a media or it is a form. That is why several years ago, Boston, the curator from Boston, Nancy, she invited 10 Chinese artists, even even Liu Xiaodong. He is the oil painter, but he was invited to make similar paintings. You know, why not? We just limited the artist to yourself. So I'm just a 水墨画家, not use any other kind of media. It's no good way for today's artists. But also, we also should notice that something changed, like you said, the return. We need what kind of return to back or return to forward. But now in CAFA, for example, you are here. Every graduation exhibition from students, you can look at that. A lot of paintings, just imitation of the ancient paintings. Not so many new creative paintings from the ink department, ink school, ink art school. Why the students just go back in this way? They just, of course, they need to imitate the ancient masters one by one to copy the masterpieces. But when they make the creations, they might focus on the older one.
Let me just say
Yeah.
that maybe that's what they want to do. And maybe the more ancient aesthetic speaks to them in a way that a lot of contemporary, noisy, strong art doesn't. And maybe they find in traditional forms something that is lacking in contemporary art across the board, and it's something that is uniquely characteristic of a very deep internalized culture. That may be part of the reason.
In relationship to this question of 水墨 as the topic and how to translate it and how to implement that, I may be wrong, but my general impression was that in China, the pushing aside of the term 国画, Chinese painting, and replacement with 水墨 took place in the 1980s. Mainly, I think, as a way to put Chinese painting into the international arena, and to use a term that didn't limit Chinese painting to China's own borders, but to expand it into an arena that could, at the very least, engage in dialogue with the arts of Japan and the arts of Korea, and potentially the arts of other areas that used ink. So that's a kind of latitudinal move to use the language that Quay used in one of the essays for the catalog. But I agree with Arnold. I think that if adopting that term means the abandonment of the longitudinal history of each of these ink arts, it's abandoning the wisdom of millennia of development. And so anyway, that doesn't solve the problem of what we call it, but perhaps what we call it relates to what we think it is.
Actually, another term we can use, maybe Richard can give us the replies. Because, we use the term modernity or modernization, including from 水墨 art, for Xu Beihong. His idea is just modernize the Chinese painting. That is why he went to Paris to learn the European paintings. His mission or idea is, I need to come back to change Chinese painting. That is his thing. But finally today, you can find some is changed, some still there. Complicated. Yeah.
But I think some reject the notion, reject the direction that Xu Beihong took in painting towards by combining East and West in a very superficial way, using Chinese techniques and Chinese tools to do something like a painting from life or painting new subjects or putting automobiles, this kind of thing. Maybe some people feel that that is actually taking away from the essence of what was great of Yuan Dynasty painting that Richard showed, a Huang Gongwang painting, which it goes beyond time and place. And if Huang Gongwang had not existed in the 14th century, and suddenly he appeared and did these paintings, I think we would certainly be able to accept them as contemporary, beautiful modern works, unprecedented in history. So I think there's different ways to look at time. And particularly the direction of Xu Beihong, I think there's a lot of feeling that particular direction wasn't very positive in Chinese art. And if you look at the history of Chinese painting over the hundreds of years, this is not the first time this happens. One of the ways that Chinese painting has always advanced is to go back to the roots and then expand in new directions.
I have a kind of broad observation about this symposium. Looking at the title, Current Trends in Ink, I don't know what the speakers were actually asked to talk about, but the talks were all to do with constructing a framework for understanding ink painting or contextualizing it in some way. And certainly this is a difficult task because ink is so multivalent and so the more perspectives the better really. But ink has been a kind of moving target as demonstrated by the different speakers' points of view. And what I think, or what I hope, is that at some point there could be a parallel conversation to this one, as much as a future conversation can be parallel, that actually dives deeper and looks at how a painting comes about, the artist's thought processes, the materials used, what is ink, what is brush, the formative aspect of it. Because I think that, framing it is an important step, but for people to really understand it, you need to look closely at individual works of art. And so I hope at some point that could come about. Oh, and also, I don't think you would have current trends in American art. Nobody would talk about framework, probably. Or maybe a little bit, but it would be much quicker into media and method and artist point of view kind of questions.
So I will respond a little bit on going back to the core of how painting come about. And I love that kind of exploration and investigation, whether it's about ink or about any other medium. One of the things that I use Zhou Zhuanfei's work as the last one to end with a certain kind of conclusion note is the fact that he went back to that original work. By deconstructing Gao Jianfu's this pumpkin flower, which is so easily to miss as you walk in the hallway and saw this small painting, and he highlighted that script by Gao Jianfu about this kind of really nation in turmoil or hometown in turmoil. And I think for Zhao Zunfei as a Hong Kong artist at this current kind of time to go back to that painting is for him to trying to relate to what Gao Jianfu was going through at the time. And I actually had a lot less interest in the Lingnan painting school before I learned about this painting. And now I think that it really kind of helped me to really have a new understanding of why the Lingnan school came about. It came about as this revolutionary spirit at the time when there's a lot of anxiety, and just like a lot of people are feeling right now about the world. So I feel like as an artist, if they could kind of provide this new interpretation that offers some new understanding to discover new knowledge, for me that was a new discovery for myself. And I feel in this particular field, there's probably quite a few artists are doing these. So I actually would love to have more discussion by hearing from other people who are in this field, because it's sort of opened up a new world to me to see how other people have done it.
Abby, I have a question. You kind of raised this, but in your presentation, you talked about it in terms of the nation, and of course, 1938. That was, and with Gao Jianfu's background, that's a key issue. But for the contemporary Hong Kong artist to choose Gao Jianfu instead of some other painter who was suffering from this national catastrophe, is he talking about something regional or even linguistic in terms of a sense of where home is?
That's a great question, because Kun Weibong, Zhao Zunfei, they were all part of this New Asia school, which was founded by Qian Mu. And it only become evident to me in recent years as I look more into the Hong Kong artists. I realized Hong Kong artists actually had the training probably among all the Chinese communities, whether it's in mainland China or Taiwan or even the United States. The past 100 years, only Hong Kong has the uninterrupted training on Chinese aesthetics from some of the best Chinese intellectuals, because they all escaped China after the 1949. And so in that sense, I feel like they benefited from some greatest intellectuals for Guoxue in the history of the recent 100 years. So I think it's debatable whether that is the kind of uninterrupted, but it seems so to me. So that becomes something, again, very interesting. So no wonder that he was going into Gao Jianfu that is relevantly closer to him in Canton, but also reflective of this bigger era of the country.
I'd just like to say in response to Arnold's comments that, first of all, I completely agree with him and deeply admire his commitment and that of many artists, particularly of, I suppose, older generations like my own. The only problem it raises is if you can accept operating within that sphere. I mean, it's a little like becoming a monk or becoming a career military man or whatever. You commit yourself to this system, this worldview, this set of values, and as long as you're content and gratified to operate within that sphere, all is well. The question that one would raise as a critic is, well, you know, does that speak to the rest of us? and as long as you're happy with that, that's fine. I don't know if everyone heard him. He said no.
those who know will know.
Yeah. But I think, you also have among many younger practitioners, people who are not as knowledgeable and not as skilled and not as dedicated, who are picking up on a trend and using ink because it's getting a lot of attention right now, and because it has a certain backing, which I alluded to earlier, including financial backing. So there's really at least two distinct camps, even within the world of ink art or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, I really like the Brita just said. I think this we really trying to Brita, of course, the most important practitioner to promote the Chinese contemporary ink. I think that we do actually the same thing. I think what we're trying to do is, I think here that's called the current trends or something. I want to show the trends is not trying to generalize certain kind of phenomena, but it's trying to indicate that actually now the artists, we should to pay more attention to the individual. You see they have more kind of the potentials, more kind of possibilities, more kind of freedom. Artists can do these kind of things compared to the 30 years ago or 40 years ago. This in China, artists have to do art in a certain way, at least a certain kind of freedom. We can say the 100% freedom, but a certain kind of freedom we can see the artists can do. It's true, I'm an art historian. We usually do the things, I always say, we do the things that actually we always, how to say, in the back, right, behind the art development. We do this kind of the conclusion kind of study, examine what happened. But on the other hand, we see this, I do some kind of curating to the contemporary artists. We see the artists that actually now, they engaged with different kind of issues, social issues, personal issues, and also the new kind of the development, the science, the technologies. We see all these things. So the ink artists actually, they are same as all other artists. For so many years, I think the 2007 we do the Chengdu Biennial together. Do you remember that time? Very much we trying to do the sense. It is showing this artist that actually, as you work on ink, you just have to open your mind and can accept the change and also facing the changes. And no matter you continue on the traditional things, or you want to seeking for some kind of new directions, combine the new technologies, all fine. As I think that we're trying to do it, break the boundaries. For so many years, I think that all the efforts we did is done. But now we see some kind of the good results. We see this. But on the other hand, also many issues come out how to do that. We just like we talked about this here quite a lot. It's about art is only to facing to concern the market issue, and actually this is now the problem here. We see the artists, not only the ink artists, we say the artists working the different kind of media, but also the same things. The market value becoming the only value to value the art. As really we know from historical point of view, we look at it before, it's not necessary. 1930s, we see the Chinese ink painting, 二五一风, right? So, but now, where the 二五一风, except Hu Fan is still there, the two other 一五一风disappeared. So that time their market price is the highest in Chinese ink painting field. So this, I think that from historical point of view, as a historian, I think I'm not too worried about this. That instead, I think that now is more kind of things we can do. Just every art, so what we can do is no matter as the art educators or as the curator show, or as the writers writing about this, what we can do is encourage people open mind, develop their not imagination.
May I ask a few questions? First, thank you all coming to Silicon Valley. Here's the place we play with computers. We really have chance to hear so many great artists and scholars to tell us, to share with us your experience and views on high-level art. So thank you so much. That's the first one. Second, on the definition of ink, looks like here we only look at the color of black. And I also heard some of you talking about Pollock, but never forget, the one who made Pollock a star was his wife, named Lee Kirshner. Her painting sold $11 million in May. So, but she was using the color of brown, like your background. Can we call that also ink? That's the first question. Second, talking about contemporary ink art, or 水墨, or calligraphy painting. From Huang Gongwang's time to now, each of the so-called 水墨 ink art, they usually have a line of a poetry. And among all the artwork you have shown me, only one Gao Jianfu's pumpkin flower has 2 lines of poetry. But that 2 lines, I think, are beautiful. If I ever pass that piece, I will buy that 2 lines in addition to the flowers. So my question is, looks like it's discontinued. We're talking about 不死, but continue. But looks like that traditional knowledge or capability of poetry and the painting of ink art is missing. Will that kind of capability and art and knowledge will ever coming back again in the next 20 years in my lifetime? Thank you.
Is this on? First, in response to Kuei's remarks, I think that in the West, it's been hard to introduce contemporary ink painters because there aren't people really qualified to write about them. And so I think it's really important that as a well-established scholar that Kuei use that platform to introduce new young artists. I think there's very few people capable of doing that, so it makes it extra important. And obviously Abby also. But then so far as poetry on paintings go, I don't know why we didn't see very many paintings with poetry today. There are lots of artists writing texts on their paintings. It may not be kind of high-level poetry, but it might be some other kind of commentary or dream remarks or something, but there's still the integration of text with image to create a work of art.
May I also ask Britta if you could let the audience know how to find your videos, which introduce individual artists very well?
I made a series of 10 short films. They're easy to get at. There's an organization called Canopy.com, and it's spelled with a K, K-A-N-P-Y.com. And if you look up Canopy.com and my name, Britta Erickson, you will get to the 10 films. And if you have a local library account, you can get to them through that. And I think most universities also, through their library, you can view the films.
A few words about this gentleman's reply of the question. Maybe not a question. It is true. The Chinese art, if we say this is a history from ancient today, it is interrupted. It's we cannot say from reality. We cannot say it will continue as before. You said in Hong Kong people continue that, but in mainland China now, nobody, even students, no other person they write as poetry in that ancient way. Even they don't have the good handwriting. Sometimes when you look at the 水墨 painting, They can make a good painting, but they cannot write very well. Even they cannot make a good sales by their own self. So usually, if they want to write some poetry, they just use the town poem or maybe other person's poem. So it is separated or it is disconnected. You cannot see their literary anymore. Very pity.
Well, this gentleman, this.
Huh? Maybe you do that.
We have tried.
I think we're almost out of time, maybe time for one more question? Yeah, is that, you know? Okay.
Yeah.
If not, I'd really like to thank all the speakers for really interesting presentations and also for the audience for your very interesting response and Edward for this fantastic event and a beautiful installation of the exhibitions.
Thank you.
Let's thank all the speakers and moderators for this symposium for the wonderful presentations and discussion. And also, we have three, just as we said, we have three exhibitions open concurrently downstairs. First floor, 2 solo shows, the solo show of Xu Lei and solo exhibition of Xu Huali. And the second floor, the entire second floor is the grouping show showing 34 artists from both China and the United States. So please enjoy the reception and enjoy the exhibitions. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.